Hi there. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whatever time it is. As always, happy whatever day it is, and welcome. I'm Larry Erickson. This is the Erickson Report. And we're going to spend time today on just two issues at all. The two, in fact, that last time I said I wanted to talk about this time. One being guns, the other being the attacks on Social Security. So we're going to start with some news about guns and the attempts to put some controls on guns, an effort that often seems like folly these days, but is still a necessary one, both for public safety and, frankly, for the sake of our own consciences. All right, on January 10th, Illinois became the 9th state to effectively ban the sale and possession of assault-style weapons. The other 8 states are California, Connecticut, Delaware, Hawaii, Maryland, Massachusetts, New Jersey, and New York, with those laws in California and New Jersey having been in effect since 1989 and 1990, respectively. Now, the question is, do such bans work? The answer is, of course they do. The Giffords Law Center notes that between 1994 and 2004, the federal government had a national ban on assault rifles in place. Mass shooting deaths in that decade were 70% lower than they were both in the years preceding the ban and in the years following it. But no matter the lives saved, the response to the Illinois action was, frankly, predictable. Because almost immediately, at least 2 Illinois county sheriffs announced they were going to simply refuse to enforce the law, whining about the Constitution as if the simple fact of being able to own a gun meant you could own any damn gun you wanted, and you can't do nothing about it. And a week or so later, a county judge in the state issued a temporary restraining order against the law. And certainly that is just going to be the first of many such suits attacking the law because, like the saying goes, no good deed goes unpunished. Meanwhile, New Jersey has been trying to find ways to enact gun controls that meet the utterly insane restrictions set by the Supreme Court in that June case called New York State Rifle and Political Association, Inc. v. Bruin, just known as the Bruin case. That decision expanded the meaning of the Second Amendment even beyond the completely ahistorical ruling in the Heller case to make it explicit that present-day legislation to control guns must align with the nation's, quote, historical tradition of gun regulation, a tradition to be found, according to the majority in the decision, in and only in the period between 1791 and 1868, because the decision said that anything before or after that period is irrelevant. It doesn't count. Which, frankly, obviously makes fighting anything that can pass muster rather a bit like the line about the camel in the eye of a needle. Now, but relying on SCOTUS, that's the Supreme Court, having said that states retain the traditional power to restrict guns in sensitive places, in December, New Jersey passed a law that, among other things, banned carrying guns in public libraries and museums, in bars and restaurants, and on private property without the owner's permission. Not good enough, said the courts. On January 8th, a U.S. District Court issued a temporary restraining order blocking implementation of those parts of the law. 3 weeks later, on January 30th, in a different case, that same judge blocked New Jersey's bans on carrying guns on the beach or in a casino. Now, like these are, again, they are preliminary injunctions. They're temporary injunctions to block a law while the case is being pursued. But keep in mind that such temporary injunctions are not supposed to be issued unless the judge thinks that there is a substantial probability that the plaintiffs will win, that they'll succeed. Meanwhile, in the emerging fascist wet dream that is Florida, Paul Renner, the Speaker of Florida's House, has proposed legislation to eliminate concealed weapons permits. That is, to allow anybody to carry a concealed gun. No permits, no training, no background checks. In other words, make Florida into a real version of the cliche version of the Wild West, just like the Founding Fathers intended. Now, and this bill is not going to have a problem getting through the mouth-breathing Gopper supermajority in the state legislature. Renner insists that the lack of training is unimportant because law-abiding gun owners will take safety seriously. Quoting him, "Safety is important, but it's not required," a statement which, gives me a great deal of comfort. And the thing is, I am sick to flaming death of hearing about law-abiding gun owners. So let me ask you this. When Nicholas Jacob Cruz legally bought an AR-15 style gun in February 2017, was he a law-abiding gun owner? When he previously legally purchased a shotgun and several rifles, was he a law-abiding gun owner? When on the morning of February 18th, 2018, he loaded that AR-15 style gun, called an Uber, and stepped out at his destination, was he a law-abiding gun owner? When he walked into Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School in Parkland, Florida, was he a law-abiding gun owner? Yes, he was. He was a law-abiding gun owner until the moment he pulled the trigger and shot the first of the 34 people he shot, 17 of whom he murdered. He was a law-abiding gun owner. Because every gun owner is a law-abiding gun owner until the moment they're not. Every criminal is a law-abiding person until the moment they're not. This crap about law-abiding gun owners is nothing but a focus group tested slogan intended to distort the argument and distract from the real issue, which is the guns. Finally, quickly, because I'm sure you've already heard about this one. There's a federal law saying that people who are subject to domestic violence restraining orders can't own guns. Well, on February 2nd, the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals said that's unconstitutional, that you can't do that. The conservative court, one of the most right-wing of the appellate courts, said, in essence here, that barring people regarded as a physical threat to intimate partners from obtaining means to kill those partners violates our historical tradition of firearm regulation and is an outlier that our ancestors would never have accepted, which says something really nasty about our ancestors. Attorney General Merrick Garland says that the administration will seek further review and will continue to defend the law. But now let it be noted, not all the news on this front is bad. For one thing, on January 18th, to my surprise, the Supreme Court rejected a bid by New York gun retailers to block new gun control laws in the state of New York. This law is an updated version of the one that was struck down in the Brauer decision back in June. I'm sorry, Bruin decision it is, the Bruin decision back in June. So New York rewrote the law to try to meet the new standards. In response to what the court did, Paloma Campana, the lead attorney for the New York gun retailers, whined that the law will put gun retailers out of business, which is frankly utter nonsense. But, on the other hand, from your mouth to God's ear, Ms. Campana. This order, by the way, comes just 1 week after the Supreme Court also rejected a separate bid by gun nuts to block the same law. Also, the U.S. Justice Department announced a new rule targeting pistol attachments known as stabilizing braces, which, in effect, they functionally turn a pistol into a short-barreled rifle, similar to a sawed-off shotgun. And finally here, on January 26th, the Department of Justice said it has obtained a court order blocking 2 firearms companies from illegally selling a device that is designed to turn an AR-15 style gun into a machine gun. The owner of Rare Breed, one of the corporations involved, said his was the only company with the balls to sell the device and that he would not turn tail and run or hide if challenged. Now we'll see if that's actually true. This case, by the way, here about those companies is part of the civil initiative, to reduce gun violence, which was launched last year by U.S. Attorney Brian Peace in Brooklyn, and it's intended to address the causes of and reduce gun-related crime. Thing is, in looking at these sorts of cases and the results, the folks who try to understand the meaning of where this comes from and so on, occasionally refer to these cases are evidence of our national love affair with guns. And I hate that terminology because it makes each seem almost harmless, almost like cute. The way we sometimes talk about our national love affair with our pets, or we might talk about our love affair with some hot new next Netflix series or something. But what we see here goes beyond that. This is not a love affair. This is not a preoccupation. This is a sickness. Our relation to guns is a sickness. It's an obsession, and I mean that in the clinical sense. It's an obsession that draws from and in turn distorts too much of our national ethos, our sense of ourselves as a people and as a culture. It's to the point where it eviscerates our logic, undermines our sense of decency, and warps our very morals. One Christian group, in a statement responding to the Uvalde massacre, actually called it a form of idolatry, which is a good term. It's proper. It fits. We don't love our guns. We adore them. We idolize them. We worship them like the golden calf, imbuing them, as all good worshipers do, with all of the values we most strongly desire to ascribe to ourselves. In our case as Americans, those are values like of freedom, of independence, of self-reliance, of standing alone against the wilderness. It's a vision of being free and powerful. A few years ago, in fact, an NRA certified instructor going by the online label Mama Liberty said so in exactly so many words. After describing gunfire at a shooting range as, quote, the sound of freedom, unquote, she went on about how she loves her guns, concluding with, quoting her, "The most important reason I love my guns is they represent self-ownership and true independence. They mark me as one who is responsible for myself. It marks me as a free human being and not a slave. Slaves are not allowed to own and carry guns. Free people can't be stopped from doing so. I love my guns and the liberty for which they stand." Frankly, in my eyes, those are not the words of an independent, free human being. They're the words of a frightened person, fearful of the world around them, wanting to be free and independent and strong, but instead seeing peril around every corner and in every change in that world. Because frankly, there was a reason that gun sales skyrocketed after Barack Obama was elected president. Now, this isn't true for all of us, of course. This kind of thing is not true for all of us, not even for most of us. It's probably not even true of a good number of gun owners. But it is true for enough among us. And the zealotry of the fanatic, the true believer, that zealotry is a social and political version of what in the military they call a force multiplier. Consider that according to the National Arms Survey in 2017, U.S. gun owners possessed over 393 million weapons, over 120 firearms for every 100 residents. We're the only country on earth where there are more civilian-owned firearms than there are civilians. And according to the study's author, ordinary American people buy approximately 14 million new and imported guns every year. In fact, you want to know how sick this is? You want to know? With 4% of the world's population, Americans own 46% of all guns in private hands. Yet Lauren Birdbrain Boebert was able to publicly lament that fact, saying we need to get our numbers up without being literally laughed off the stage to the point of being laughed out of public life altogether. That's how sick this idolatry is. But only 1/3 of American adults actually own at least one gun. Only 45% of us live in households where anybody owns a gun. And at no time in the last 50 years, which is as far back as the figures go, has that figure ever been more than 48%. Which means that what we have here is what amounts to massive arsenals concentrated in the hands of a small percentage of people. Yet that small number of sick people are driving our entire national policy on guns and thereby on gun crime. The inevitable predictive result is guns are so easy to get, and the inevitable predictable result of that is that the rate of death from gun violence in the United States is higher than in places like Somalia, like Syria, like Afghanistan. It is far, far higher than in other economically developed democracies. Our death rate from guns is 8 times higher than in Canada, 100 times higher than in the United Kingdom, 200 times higher than in South Korea or Japan. And those comparisons, by the way, those don't include gun deaths from suicides. Consider that suicides make up over half of the gun deaths in the United States, and it's clear that the real comparison about death by gun is even worse than those figures that I quoted. In fact, guns are now the leading cause of death for our children up to the age of 19. Meanwhile, the Gun Violence Archive defines a mass shooting as 4 or more people shot in a single incident, not counting the shooter. Okay, as of February 12th, just 43 days into the year, there have been 65 mass shootings in the United States, more than an average of 1.5 a day, like 10 or 11 a week. 6 of those were mass murders, 4 or more people killed in a single incident. But even that is only a small part of the story. The mass killings shock us, they move our hearts, but they also serve to hide the daily grind of blood and death that guns bring to us. Again, as of February 12th, estimates are that over 5,000 people had died at the end of a gun. That's 116 a day, every day. Estimates are that there are over 2,800 gun suicides. That's 66 a day, every day, day after day. Our idolatry of guns is a sickness, one that will continue to warp our society and splatter us with the blood of innocence until we at the very least face the fact that the single gun issue before us is that there are too damn many guns that are too damn easy to get. And I need a break. And we are back with the other topic we're going to talk about today, which is the attacks on Social Security. As we approach the showdown over raising the deficit ceiling, something that only becomes an issue for the Goppers when there's a Democrat in the White House, we again see the Goppers looking for ways to attack their bête noire, which is Social Security. Most of them won't admit that they're doing that, of course, but that is what they're after. Right now, as a group, they're in a bit of a bind because during the State of the Union address, they very cleverly maneuvered themselves into the position where Biden could say that, well, obviously we have unanimity that Social Security is off the table. But since neither consistency nor honesty mean anything to these people, that is not going to be a problem for them. They've long been looking for ways to cut the program. In fact, a common way now frequently that they argue for this is raising the retirement age. For example, Representative Rick Allen, who says raising the retirement age would solve every problem with Social Security. And he's not the only one doing it. Former Vice President Mike Not Worth a Farthing said on February 2nd that he wants to reform Social Security, including raising the retirement age. The apparently leading non-declared candidate for the Gopper nomination for the presidency, Ron DeSantis, actually repeatedly supported raising the retirement age and other ways of cutting it when he was in Congress. The Republican Study Committee, which is a House panel made up of Goppers, last year it called for raising the full retirement age from 67 to 70. Wait, 67 to 70? What? Yeah, because unlike what some people might still think, retirement age, that is full retirement age, is not 65. It hasn't been for decades. It's gradually being raised based on your birth date. For people my age, for example, the full retirement is 66. For those born, it's still being raised such that those born in 1960 and after, full retirement is already at 70. Now, the effect of this is a bit confusing, okay? So what follows is based on how Matt Brunig of the People's Policy Project explains it. You first become eligible for Social Security retirement benefits at age 62. Those benefits for you, your benefits, are set on your age in years and months at the time that you retire. which actually means there isn't one retirement age. There are 96, one for each month between 62 and 70. Your benefits are reduced based on the number of months between that age when you actually retire and your full retirement age. The greater the difference, the greater the cut, which really means that full retirement age for you is just a place marker for calculating your benefits. So raising the retirement age then means that whenever you do retire, there's going to be a bigger difference between that and your full retirement age, and so you'll see a deeper cut. So quoting Brunig now, when someone proposes increasing the retirement age to 70, they are proposing to cut monthly benefits by around 23% at all 96 retirement ages. Which means, again, raising the Social Security retirement age is a benefit cut. So whenever any GOPR, or in fact any Democrat, says to you that we're going to raise the retirement age, but we're not going to cut benefits, they're either lying or they're stupid. All this also, by the way, explains the careful, no doubt, focus group language being used. For example, GOPR Representative Chip Roy said on January 8th, "We're not going to touch the benefits that are going to people relying on the benefits under Social Security." Now note well, he only promised safety to those who are now relying on the benefits, which means A, it doesn't apply to anybody in the future, and B, it leaves open means testing Social Security. Turning it from an entitlement means you worked, you put in, now you get an amount out as set by law, into a form of public assistance based on your wealth and your need for the benefit, almost like it was, gas welfare, with all the negative connotations of the term. And it's also true that there are going to be a significant number of people who wouldn't pass a means test they don't have to have Social Security. They don't completely rely on Social Security. And so those people just wouldn't get Social Security benefits, which not only shrinks the program, but it also reduces political support for that program, because there are going to be fewer people who have any reason to support it, have any reason to be invested in the program continuing. And means testing is on the GOPR agenda. It was one of the proposals in that Republican study committee I mentioned a couple of minutes ago. And be clear, raising the retirement age and means testing are not the only ways GOPRs have proposed to slash the program. For example, Mike Not Worth a Farthing said he wants to institute private savings accounts. Now, this is an idea from the age of Bush 2. And it involves people being able to take some part of the Social Security taxes now being withheld from their pay and instead put that into a private savings account. The message here is, in effect, even though it's not going to be called that, but what it means is we're going to slash Social Security. It's up to you to make up the difference. Now, Pence set the idea in the terms of cutting the federal debt. That is a lie. It's one of the many lies told by the right wing about the Social Security program. Social Security is self-funded through payroll taxes, which means it has no impact on any long-term debt, no impact on any yearly deficit. In fact, Social Security takes money from its funds and invests them in treasury bonds, getting a little more in from the interest from that. But it also means that not only does not Social Security raise any debt or deficit, it actually helps to finance that deficit. Here's another lie. GOPR Buddy Carter saying Social Security will be insolvent by 2033. First it got the date wrong. It's actually 2035. But this is the lie that is young folks saying that Social Security won't be there for them when they retire, that it will be bankrupt and shut down. The truth is that even during the Ronald Reagan administration, it was already well known that the demographic bulge of the baby boomers, that's like my cohort, that we were going to put a strain on the Social Security system. So the tax rate for Social Security was raised specifically to build up a surplus to deal with that prospect. In other words, we baby boomers essentially pre-financed our own retirement benefits. That surplus is now around $2.9 trillion. Now, recently, Social Security payments, as expected, as predicted, have begun to exceed income from Social Security taxes. And so the fund has started to dip into that reserve in order to pay the benefits, which is exactly why that reserve was created. So being insolvent in 2035, okay, what that means is that's when it's projected that the surplus will have been depleted and Social Security will be back on the pay-as-you-go status that it has been on for most of its 88-year history. That's all that means. And even at that point, if we make no adjustments at all, if we do nothing in the interim, at that point, Social Security would still be able to pay like 80% of projected benefits. And the word projected is important because that's not a reduction from current benefits. It's a potential reduction from the higher projected benefits those years in the future. And again, that's assuming we do nothing in the interim. But for right now, it's also important to realize that it's not just the goppers who are pulling crap like this. It's not. For example, back in 2012, Barack Obama, the amazing Mr. O, President Hopey Changey, he actually groused that he wasn't getting enough credit for his willingness to cut Social Security as part of a so-called grand bargain with the right wing. But, well, that was history, but like they say, same as it ever was. Joe Manchin is now arguing that we have a debt problem and specifically called out Social Security in that regard, which again is nonsense. The program does not add to the deficit. In fact, Social Security is barred by law from borrowing money. It cannot add to debt. So which means his idea is it's bull to start from. But he's got legislation together with that other great moderate, Mitt Romney, for a bipartisan congressional committee with a 180-day deadline to devise legislation to restore solvency to the program. Legislation which would then be placed on an expedited path to floor votes in both houses of Congress. Expedited, by the way, means no amendments allowed. We've been here before. We have. This idea is specifically modeled after the infamous Simpson-Bowles Commission of 2010. It was headed by former Senator Alan Simpson and Erskine Bowles, who were both advocates of cutting Social Security and were appointed to head this commission by Obama. It became popularly known as the Cat Food Commission because it proposed cutting Social Security benefits by up to 35% and raising the retirement age to 69, creating the image of people, having to survive on pet food. And by the way, it also proposed things like slashing veterans' benefits, increasing interest rates on student loans, eliminating 450,000 federal jobs, and more, while at the same time cutting taxes for the richest. And now we have the bipartisan, I guarantee you're going to hear that word a lot about this, proposal to do the same thing all over again. Now, none of this has anything to do with any demand from the public. In fact, you want to see bipartisan, I'll give you bipartisan. According to a recent survey conducted by Data for Progress, 83% of likely voters support expanding Social Security benefits, including heavy majorities of Democrats, Republicans, and independents. Meanwhile, 2/3 of those same voters are deeply concerned that Congress may actually do the opposite and cut benefits. Privatization is also rejected across the board by Democrats, Republicans, and independents alike. 68% of voters say don't do it, and again, a majority are very concerned that Congress is going to do the opposite. Social Security is popular and it works, and that's exactly the reason the right wing wants to kill it. All right, that's it. We're done. I'm out of here. We will see you in 2 weeks. In the meantime, you have the best 2 weeks you possibly can. As always, peace.
That's the